You're listening to Two Guys Talking Wine with Michael Pincus and André Prue.
Hello, Michael.
André, how the hell are you?
I'm pretty darn good, although really starting to question my choices of where I live. It's -5 as we get to the middle of December, and I'm already sick of winter.
Really? That's surprising because we didn't really have a winter last year.
Can we have more of those, please?
I had frost on the ground this morning where I am, and I had to start my car and let it thaw.
Well, there we go. Before we get into what we're talking about this week, I made a mistake in our scheduling, and no one you know what? For all of you listening who are regular listeners, not a single person text messaged me to let me know that I'd made a mistake. And Michael, you and I also did not check that we'd made a mistake. Things have been a little bit frantic over at the Prue Verenkevich Hacienda as I was traveling the second last week of November. You and I have been frantically working ahead a little bit because we didn't know what things were going to be like with you being in Europe for God knows how long. And the last episode of Two Guys Talking Wine about our Toronto Life tasting was a bonus episode.
Yeah, it came out a little early, and I get an email about them every time, and I thought, well, that's rather kind of early. I thought that would, and it didn't occur to me. I was like, okay, well, I'll post about it later, and I did realize that it was a week early, so I just kind of left it for a bit.
I love the fact that you trust me and you trust my method like so much that you just sort of let it ride.
Yeah, I was like, whatever happens. Okay, I guess he meant that to come out to coincide with the. With Toronto Life, I thought maybe you knew the dates it came out and you wanted to either beat it or join it or whatever you were going to do. But yeah, I just go with it. I just go with the flow on that one.
So you and I, like, we've done a really great job this year talking about, or actually just doing a lot of like really, really great interviews. You and I have had a chance to do, I guess, not as much travel as I think normal. This is the first year I haven't been invited on a press trip in a while. But I mean, I'm certainly not complaining about that. But like, I did find a way to go and get some really great content. My trip to the Finger Lakes in April, and then my visit to Portugal in November. And you and I thought it might be a good opportunity to recap, I guess, just a little bit of what we've been doing and what the travel's been looking like.
Well, yeah, I don't. Yeah, this summer was kind of slow. Except we did go to Mexico. I can't.
That was in April, man.
I know. It seems like it was yesterday, and the year has gone by so fast. It's like now we're sitting in December, and you were like, oh, this may be the last podcast of the season, or we have one more coming up, and I was like, well, what are you talking about? Oh, I guess it is December. And my birthday happened, and it was like, boom. Like, everything's just happening so quickly. So I should ask you, how was Portugal? The funny part is that we left at the same time, like literally within 3 hours of each other, and we missed each other at the airport because we were in like I was in Terminal 3 and you were in Terminal 1. And I think at some point we thought, oh, we'll catch a beer together. Neither one of us figured the other one would be in the other terminal.
Yeah, and that was a little bit, I'm not gonna lie, a little bit disappointing. It was a Grey Cup Sunday. I did manage to watch the game. It was a quite exciting game this year, even though I was cheering for neither team.
I was again shocked that Toronto pulled it off. Like Winnipeg looked so strong. It's like, what's going on here? So
I don't know. I just, as a Saskatchewan Roughrider fan, it makes me happy to see Winnipeg lose, and even more so to see Winnipeg Blue Bombers fans be disappointed. Sorry, Ilya and Nadia, but it's true.
I had no skin in the game. The Edmonton just wasn't. Well, they did better this year. They actually won a few games, so it was quite exciting to see that.
All right, so I guess like diving right into to answer your question, how was Portugal? So I visited Portugal for the first time in 2017 on a press trip to Vinho Verde, and I really did fall in love with the country while I was there. But it's the thing where, like, you and I, our family and friends don't give us a lot of sympathy when we're doing wine travel, and understandably so. We get to travel to some of the most beautiful parts of the world where grapes are grown, where wine is made. But the thing about press trips that people don't realize is it's still work. You're on someone else's dime. You don't get. I don't think I've ever been on a press trip where I've been given any significant amount of free time, like maybe minus an hour or two here and there when you're in between travels. Like, you don't have time to go do any sort of shopping or check out any restaurants. And by the way, this is not complaints, because you're usually put up in very nice hotels. You're taken to some very nice restaurants. But the thing is, you're on someone else's dime and someone else's time. So the trip is completely and fully structured. The nice thing is you do get a really great look at the country. So I was actually very excited to go back, because on the trip to Vinho Verde, they fly you into Porto in the north of Portugal. I got to spend maybe 8 hours in that city, and then the rest of the trip I was on buses and vans and all over the north of the country. I really loved having a chance to spend like 3 days in Porto. And I know I've said on this podcast in the past that Lyon in France is my favorite place to visit, full stop. But I'm not going to lie, Porto is giving it a run for its money. It's a beautiful city. Like, it's a visually beautiful city with the hills and the lakeshore with the Douro, with all the port houses and all the restaurants down there. Really great food scene, public transit, but not as busy as like a major city. And like, Michael, I know you were just in Rome, and like, when you're in one of those major cities, places like Rome or Paris or London, like, they're beautiful places, they're important places, they're touristic places to visit. Like, there's a reason why there's so many tourists that go there. They're worth the visit, but it can feel a little claustrophobic when you're in those big cities. Like what do you think?
Well, interestingly enough, when I was in Rome, I was in a little corner of it called Monteverde, and I had no idea that this corner of it existed. I found a really neat little boutique hotel while we were there, and it didn't feel big city-ish. And that was the interesting part. I guess I was in some sort of suburb of Rome, where I could walk literally 5 blocks, and I was in a totally residential area. Though I was there on a Saturday, and I walked 2 blocks, and I found this farmer's market, which was really neat. It was like a pop-up farmer's market on Saturdays only. Takes over this huge parking lot, and like I went there the next day on the Sunday, and all they had there was like big garbage bins. Like, that was it. And it was like, wow, they cleaned that place up so quickly. Because to me, it looked like a permanent farmer's market. The way it was set up, they had little shanties that had stalls in them and things like that. But this time, it didn't feel like I was in big city Rome. And again, that's one of those things that you wouldn't get on a press trip, because they wouldn't put you up in a small little suburb. They would put you up in the middle of town.
Interesting. So, I mean, what was your Roman experience like?
Actually, I didn't really do much in Rome. It rained the whole time. so I wanted to go to the Vatican, and I even I was ready to take a picture of the Vatican. And I had a song that I was going to play underneath the background of the thing, and I couldn't do it, so I was really upset by that.
What song was it? What were you trying to pull, Michael?
Well, I had reworked the words to "Paradise City" by Guns N' Roses. Yeah. So I was going to play Paradise City, and then just do, like, I was going to print out lyrics to take me down to the Vatican City, where the priests are warned not to diddle with the kiddies.
Oh my God, Michael!
Yeah,
I mean, not true, but we're still trying to elevate the discourse on this podcast, but also. Everyone should go watch the movie Spotlight if you don't know what Michael's talking about. But I don't know who doesn't know what Michael's talking about.
It's not secretive, and it was weird because even while I was here, I think what it was, the New York Archbishop had to quit or step down or whatever due to the abuse of children. Now, I don't know how the church gets away with it, but we're not talking about church. But I mean,
yeah. Why don't we move right off that? And we could talk a bit about wine, and I want to talk about what you're doing in Italy and what you've done with wine. But I did start my trip in Lisbon. I spent 2 days in Lisbon, and I did enjoy it, not as much as I did Porto. But there was something right downtown that, I have these moments when I travel, when I go to the United States, it makes me frustrated with the LCBO when you see the selection especially at specialty stores, especially when you go to a place like New York City or even up in the Finger Lakes, etc. And when I travel to Europe, I try to make sure that I'm not wearing rose-colored glasses about what we can and can't do in Ontario. But there was something in the downtown of Lisbon that... it shocked me a little bit that we don't have something like this right in downtown Toronto. And it's a permanent setup. And this is something where I actually need to give Wine Country Ontario a tiny bit of credit. They've got this van that they're driving all over the province, popping up at events, pouring Ontario wine. They had a pop-up at Union Station last year, but they have a permanent Wines of Portugal shop in downtown Lisbon where you go in. The people who are working there know about the wines, can answer your questions. So it's not just, a bunch of summer students wearing a Wines of Portugal t-shirt. And I went in there, introduced myself as a journalist. I was very happy to pay for my tastings. They had the machines. I can't remember what they're called, but Michael, it's the thing that you used to love in Florida where, you put
yes.
$20-$30 on it. And they have a whole bunch of wines open of varying prices and quality with little maps. They give you a map to tell you where it's from. It was awesome. It was just completely awesome. I was about to head up to the north to go do some tasting and go do some winery tours. This was a perfect way to kind of prime things, right? Can you imagine if Wine Country Ontario had the resources to put a kiosk like that, I don't know, maybe at Pearson. I don't know if that's the right place, but definitely at Union Station for people who are getting off the Up Express to get a chance to kind of sample the wines before they go out. But man,
I don't know where the right place would be for something like that. But so you had that experience, and I think they're called Enotech machines, but I think there's more machines than that now. There's a bunch of machines that do that. I was just in a wine store today that had that. Really quickly, I said, "Can I try this before I buy it?" And they're like, "Boom, boom, done. Try that." Here where I am in Piedmont, I'm in a town called Nizza Monferrato. Nizza is this growing wine area, and we'll get into that a little bit later after you finish Portugal. But they too have a wine store, literally right in the middle of town, that has all of the wines from the area. All of them. If you want to taste them, you can taste them. I don't know how many they have. I don't think they have all of them for tasting, but they have a number for tasting. And then it's broken down into, Nizza and some Barolos around, but it's all from the area so that you can get an idea of what you're looking for. I also love the walking down the street, and it doesn't matter what kind of store it is. They seem to have wine on every shelf. The only places that don't are clothing stores. I think. But if you sell a croissant, you've got bottles of wine on the shelf. If you're a bar, obviously you've got wine to sell on the shelf. And I've bought a couple of bottles off of bar or even restaurant shelves while I'm here.
So, I mean, apart from our experience, like just the touristic experience. Geez, I'm having trouble with that word for some reason. I know you're a bit of a picky eater. We've teased you a little bit about the podcast, but I think it's time to be a little bit serious. Italy is definitely a good country to visit if you are a pickier eater. Like, it's pretty safe ingredients for the most part. Have you had any like really standout meals, and are there any restaurants that you want to shout out that you've visited so far?
I was at Due La Terna last night, and they had this basically this braised beef that's in a it's in a kind of a gravy, but it's made with the Nizza wine, and the meat was just so tender, like just fork tender. Like, not even, like, I think I barely had to touch my fork into it. But being in Piedmont, I have, I'm going to have it posted in the next couple of days. I decided to do a tour of Vino Tonato, which is the veal and tuna sauce that they have here in Piedmont. I have had 3 or 4 different iterations of it so far, and each dish is totally different than the next. You know, I've had one that was like a meal size, but usually it's served as an appetizer. And the sauces are so different. Some of them have big chunks of tuna in them. Today's was like almost like a mayonnaise with like just the taste of tuna to it. It's such an interesting dish. And I get it at every restaurant just so that I can try and find the different, yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, good for you. That's pretty adventurous for you, Michael.
Well, I've always liked this dish ever since the first time I tried it. And the veal is cut like super thin. And then you kind of just spread this sauce on it, roll it up, and eat it. And it's really, really good. Like, it's really a lot. Like, it sounds, somebody said to me today, it's a dish that there's no way it should work. It's veal, it's anchovies, it's mayonnaise, it's tuna, it's egg, it's olive oil. It shouldn't work. It just doesn't. Anchovies, tuna, veal. Doesn't sound like it works.
To me, like, everything about that works. Like, although that being said, like, growing up in Saskatchewan, anchovies were an acquired taste for me. But like now, it's something I keep on hand all the time, just because there's so much umami in anchovies. Like, my mouth is just like watering, and this is the thing where anchovies is one of those ingredients where if you get a chance to go to Italy, or Michael, I hope, because I know you're staying there and hopefully doing a little bit of cooking, buy good anchovies. It does make a difference in terms of the quality of flavor and if you decide to cook with them.
So do you cook with anchovies? Do you eat them just raw?
Both. I usually have to buy twice as many anchovies as the recipe calls for, because it's, one for the recipe, one for me.
So here's supposedly this is something that is just very Piedmontese. It's bread, like a little piece of like almost French bread, and they put butter on it, but they don't spread it. They put butter on it like in a chunk, like you would take a butter and scoop it like an ice cream scoop, and they put it on, and then they put the anchovy over it, and that's how you're supposed to eat it. These 2 dollops of big dollops of butter and an anchovy on bread, and that is the delicacy. That
sounds good to me.
It was just, I saw it today and I was like, well, that's very strange.
I don't think that's strange at all. But I mean, I guess in North America, our cold cut game is so lame. Like, growing up, and I'm sure, Michael, you're of the generation. This is one where there's an overlap of like your generation and my generation. Is like, we grew up with bologna sandwiches, and it's just like, charcuterie in Europe is just so much more ingrained in the culture than what you and I were raised with.
Yeah, I had a salami today that was great. We were wrapping them, we were wrapping them around gratinis, which are just Italian breadsticks that are thin, and you just wrap this salami around it, and it was just you could have made a meal out of that. It was delicious. And in Rome, I had something called a supli, which I had never heard of. It's basically an arancini, but it's about the size of a tennis ball. And the crust on the outside is harder. So it's when you cut into it, it really makes a crackle. And the rice is like super fine. You can actually see each individual grain instead of it being just, sometimes you get like an arancini and it's just like a white ball and it's rice and it's leftover rice, but and all the rice is in a tomato sauce and it's got the cheese in the middle, and it was absolutely outstanding. That I could have eaten a dozen of, picked it up like an apple.
I guess one thing as a point of interest to people who are listening to this, if you've never had a chance to travel to Italy, and I'm by no means an expert, but I remember my trip to Franciacorta, which is also in the north of Italy, like Piedmont. You get off the plane expecting pasta and sauces, and when you talk about that braised beef dish, and sort of go back to that, I remember my trip in the north having something like that served me, where the beef was actually, it was boiled beef. It was like a pot roast or something that had the snot boiled out of it, but not too much. Like, it was still moist, and it was exactly like you described, tender, where you put the fork in it. It's just like, Italian food merits further research if you think that Italian food is just spaghetti and meatballs,
Well, it's really interesting because somebody told me what it was called on the menu, and it was called, literally translates to overcooked meat. That's what it translates to. And I'm like, you mean braised?
But I mean, that's it though. It's kind of funny, when you actually sit and you think about so much of the really great cuisine. I smoked a brisket last weekend, and I mean, smoking a brisket is just a very controlled overcooking of a lousy cut of meat, right? Like, you take a lousy cut of meat and you cook it until it becomes tender, and you just need to monitor it super carefully to make sure it doesn't dry out. And, it's the same thing too with things like cheese. Actually, I love thinking about the concept of cheese. It's like, cheese is controlled spoilage, right? Like, you've taken milk, you've infused it with bacteria that may, at some point in history, may or may not have killed you. And, at some point in history, some dude was just like, I'm so hungry that bowl of milk that I forgot about, that's now solid, I'm going to try eating that. And it didn't kill them.
Yeah. And they kept trying to do it. Yeah. And I, when you do think of Italy and the pasta is very regional. I did not know this, but on my birthday, I had in Rome, I had carbonara, and I did not know that carbonara is Roman. You're not going to find that in any other part of Italy, but it is very Rome, and it's true. I've seen menus in other parts of it that does not appear anywhere else in Italy that I have seen so far. Because I'm now looking for it, and it's not. But where I am now, which is in Piedmont, tajarin is the local pasta, which is like an egg noodle, and that does not appear on any other part of Italy. It's very Piedmontese.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Did you have any pizza in Rome? That's one of my favorite things, by the way.
I didn't have it in Rome, but I had one here in Piedmont. I had a gorgonzola pizza. Man, that was really good.
Are you a blue cheese fan? I seem to remember you not being a blue cheese fan.
No, I like blue cheese. Love blue cheese. But gorgonzola is not just blue cheese. Gorgonzola, I have a guide who's French, and then, so last night I had dinner with an Italian and somebody who was French, and I'm looking at them both, and we were talking about cheese for dessert, and so I said, French cheese or Italian cheese, and of course the French woman said, oh, French, of course, and the Italian guy goes, no, Italian. And then they went back and forth, and then, because they were comparing cheeses back and forth, and then he goes, gorgonzola, and she goes, yeah, we can't compete with that one.
That's hilarious. I mean, like Guillaume, one of my best friends, my best friend is from France, one of the business partners in the ADX Wine Company. And the couple times I've gone to Italy, I love to text message him about the cheese while I'm there. And I'll send him messages once in a while. Like if I ate like a really nice sauce, she's like, I think this cheese is better than Camembert. And you usually get salty responses. The locals in both France and Italy take a lot of pride in their.
They do take a lot of pride in the cheese. But like I said, doesn't France have blue cheese? And she says, yes, we do, but we have nothing that compares really to Gorgonzola.
I'd argue that like a really great Saint Agur or like a really great Roquefort would compare. But like it is one of those things where like it's not an either or. I want all of them. And just as a fun fact, with opening up the bakery this year, we get wholesale pricing. We have a wholesaler on cheese, and earlier this year I saw I could get a half wheel of Gorgonzola for about $30. So over the course of 2024, I ate an entire wheel of Gorgonzola, and that was only in the first 4 months of the year.
That is a good cheese. Every time I get a chance to and it gets so ooey and gooey, and you just spread that on bread or just eat it on its own. It is such a good cheese. And there's different versions of it too. You can get the sweet version, you can get the really almost spicy version of it. There's the really nice part of Parmesan is the same thing. You can get like young Parmesan or you get old Parmesan. And it's a different world when you try those.
Totally. Now, just before we rattle on a little bit too long, I do want to talk a little bit about the food up in Porto, and I do want to give actually shout out to a couple of restaurants that I visited. First off, this was a Michelin guide restaurant. It doesn't have any stars, but I would not be surprised if it picks up a star at some point in the future in Porto. A restaurant called Fauno, Fauno. It's run by a team of twin brothers. One brother does the front of house. The other one was in the back of house cooking. We did a tasting menu there. The wine list was fantastic. We had a very funky Loureiro, obviously drinking Vinho Verde to get us ready to go up north. And I mean, just in terms of like quality to price, it was one of the most memorable meals I've had, full stop.
Sounds like a big night.
Are you making some pop culture reference I'm not going to pick up on?
Yes, I am. There was a movie with Stanley Tucci where he was the chef, and the guy who played Monk, who played Monk again, Tony Shalhoub. They were brothers. Have you not seen Big Night? You should watch Big Night. They own this restaurant, and they're brothers, and they have this big fight through the course of the movie.
Yeah, and isn't this like the restaurant's going out of business? And,
yes. Yeah.
What's it called? A stromboli? Is that the dish that they make? Like the...
That's a special something that I can't remember what it is, but yes, it's and they have this big night where they're supposed to save the restaurant, but they end up fighting like all night.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen the movie, but I need to see the movie. No, Fauno was nothing like that. The brothers seemed to actually... It was it was a really, really like just great vibe to the restaurant, great feel to the restaurant, great service. And you know, like dealing with the Portuguese in general. Like I love Portuguese people. There's just like a warmth to their hospitality, and this isn't saying anything bad about the Italians or the French. It's just there is this kind of like instant hospitable warmth that you feel when you make a connection with a Portuguese person that can be a little bit harder to accomplish when you meet someone from Italy or France. So I'm already thinking about my next trip there.
So, did you try any like grape varieties, in wines that you'd never heard of before?
Probably a bunch of them. It's one of those things though where, so like I have a philosophy with food and with wine where I'll drink first and ask questions later. The thing about Portuguese red wines in particular is they have a lot of indigenous varieties. Obviously, you see a lot of things with Touriga Nacional, which is, I guess, their signature red variety. The thing about most of the red wines that I tasted, especially up in the north, is it was very much what I remembered on my trip in 2017. A lot of like blue and purple fruits, like blueberry, blackberry, plum flavors. But the tannin always had this like rustic edge to it, you know, kind of aggressive and wood resiny. But since 2017, where I don't think I found a single red wine that, you know, made me happy in 2017. On this trip, I don't know if it's just my experience, because like obviously I've learned a lot about wine in 7 years, and I've tasted a hell of a lot more wines over the past 7 years, but I didn't find a red wine that I didn't dig while I was there. And like, don't get me wrong, like there were some wines that were just like, okay, I'm happy to be tasting this, happy to have a glass. Like I didn't love them. And as always, Michael, your stupid little voice is in my head being like, just remember, you're in the country, you're probably not enjoying this as much as you think you are. It's just like, so like the stuff that I really enjoyed, like really did stand out. In terms of like what I bought to bring home with me, I didn't bring any red wines home with me, but I did bring a bunch of port wines.
Yeah.
And a bunch of white wines from Vinho Verde. But yeah, in terms of varieties that I didn't know, like if you go to the north of Portugal and you go with the philosophy that I said, we went to a couple of wine shops too, where, you know, what like once again, going to a private wine shop where you have people who are passionate about what they're doing, who care about what they're doing. And you know, this is another dig at the LCBO, is I feel like the quality of employees at the LCBO has just gone down, unless you're going to like a Summerhill or a Queen's Quay and you're dealing with people like Victor and you're dealing with the people who actually give a crap. The LCBO is failing everywhere else in the province, and they're literally leaving money on the table. Is like, I go into a shop in a suburb of Porto and we talk about that my wife likes red wine. I'm not a fan of the aggressive tannin of most Portuguese reds. What can you recommend for us? Oh, let's talk about this wine. Let's talk about that wine. And leave the store with a couple of bottles that we both supremely enjoyed because the person selling the wine knew what the hell they were doing.
Well, that is the thing, right? The LCBO is a failure, a failing business model, like completely. And, you know, you had talked about you didn't want to take a crap all over the LCBO. Unfortunately, I get a lot of questions about the LCBO here because I'm meeting a lot of winemakers and they want to know more about the LCBO. And what they do know is that, you know, they want to get their wine in there, but it's hard to get their stuff in. And I wish I could give them, you know, the magic bullet of how to get in there. But I don't even know if our agents know the magic bullet. It is so hit and miss. It is so scattershot. You know, you never know what the deal is.
Well, I mean, you and I are really, like, now that we've had a chance, especially like since the LCBO basically cut off our support, you and I have had a chance to form better relationships with some of the agents. And the thing is, the agents who really know what they're doing are definitely thriving. And, you know, if I'm a small producer in Italy, I would make sure, and I would recommend to them to avoid dealing with the LCBO altogether. Find an agent who is passionate about what you're making and let them sell consignment. Let them sell to restaurants direct. Avoid dealing with the bull crap that comes with getting your product listed at the LCBO. And not only that, if you find a great agent, and we know who they are. I don't want to play favorites with anyone, but like we've talked about them, and if you take a look at who's taking the time to market their wine and, you know, get line interviews up with you and I and things like that, like these are the wine agents that are hustling to make sure that the product's getting sold, that people know where to get them, and that people know that they don't need to go to the LCBO to get them.
Yeah, but everybody knows about the LCBO, and that really becomes the bigger issue. As far as grape varieties that like I'm in Barolo country, right? I'm in Barolo, Barbaresco. Where I'm actually at is Nizza Monferrato, and we should really, you know, at some point dig into what Nizza is, and basically Nizza is Cru Barbera. Like that's where I am. So I'm drinking a lot of Barbera during the day. And at night, when I'm having dinners, I'm getting a lot of, you know what, maybe you don't want to have another Barbera. How about we have something like Pella Verga? And I'm like, what's Pella Verga? Oh, it's a grape. And I'm like, is it red or white? And it's red. And it was almost like Pinot. There's so many light red wines in this area that I didn't know about. There's another one called Grinolino, which is also, they make very light, easy drinking, very acid based wines. These are two great varieties that appeared at the table, and I'm like, you probably want a Barolo. And I'm like, no, I want to drink anything that I can get my hands on that's interesting and unique, because we are never going to see Grignolino in Ontario. We're never going to see Pella Verga in Ontario, not at the LCBO, and not. And if you got an agent that does have it, it's going to be super expensive because it's unique, it's rare, but here it's not expensive. And that's another thing that drives me crazy. I've been drinking also a lot of Moscato. I love Moscato, and it is while I'm here, everybody's starting to know that I have a little sweet spot for Moscato, and so a dessert isn't dessert. Like, you can get biscotti or cookies, or you can get like a creme caramel or a creme catalan or whatever. But usually, right now, it's like people are like, we know you like Moscato, we're going to order another bottle of Moscato. And there's so many different variations of some of them are super sweet, and some of them are almost to the point where they're sweet but dry. And I've never had, I had one from Breda the other night that starts sweet, ends dry, and all you wanted to keep doing was having another sip because of that dry finish, but you want that sweet hit. It was like cocaine in a bottle.
Sorry, did you just say cocaine in a bottle?
Yeah, because what it is it's sweet on the palate, but then it finishes dry, and you keep wanting that hit. You want that sweet hit, right? So it's like you keep sipping. And the guy I was with, because nobody had ever had a Breda at the table, had ever had a Breda Moscato. And the guy finished 3 glasses before I finished my first, because it's just like you kept wanting that. You want that sweet hit.
Okay, I think we might need to clarify for the listeners right now. You have never tried cocaine, at least as far as I know, and we're certainly not condoning the use of drugs, especially in comparison to Moscato d'Asti.
No, I never have, nor am I. But you see movies. It's okay. Let's put it like this way. Let's put it this way. Then it's like the drugs that people get hooked on when they're in pain, right? I can't think of it right now, but yeah. Oh, it's like an opiate. It really is. It's like an opiate. Oh my God.
Okay, let's move on. Let's move off of this before we get you in trouble and we get us in trouble here.
Good Moscato is an opiate. That's what I'm trying to say.
I want to talk a bit about my visit to the port houses. I had a chance to do 3 port tours. I visited Newport, which was super fascinating, and super fascinating to see what that family is doing. I think it's almost like in response to the fact that, like, I don't, as far as I know, and I can pull some statistics on this, but the port market is not the most exciting thing. It's at least not in Ontario. Like you and I, we like drinking Taylor's when it shows up. We were happy to include Taylor Fladgate, the 20-year-old Tawny Port, on our annual gift list. But like we just don't get a ton of variety of port in Ontario, and this is one where I can't help but wonder if it's a chicken and egg problem. Is the fact that the market isn't drinking a lot of port is because we don't have like a decent selection and there's nothing interesting worth checking out, or are we just not drinking it because people aren't drinking it? I mean, you just admitted that you have a little bit of sweet tooth, and like a sweet spot in your palate for Moscato d'Asti. You and I, when we do that Toronto Life tasting, we do enjoy tasting the ice wines, and the fun thing about doing that tasting is when we get a few ice wines show up, it becomes very transparent very quickly which are the good ones and which are the not so good ones. So yeah, there is the colors of the spectrum in terms of quality for that. But the reality is like people just don't drink sweet wines when they're saying sweet wines, right? Like the market's going to grab a bottle of Josh or grab a bottle of Camus that's 10 grams per liter, but they think they're drinking dry wines, when the reality is I think I think we need to encourage people to be less ashamed to admit that they like sweet wines.
Well, people always say they drink dry, but they end up drinking sweet. You're always going to like something that's a little sweeter. It's that hit. But and port, I find, is the same thing. But with port, you're also dealing with a higher alcohol content. You're dealing with a more viscous kind of wine. I love a good port, and it doesn't compare to Moscato. Moscato is a 5% alcohol, light, fresh, fruity. Port is I don't want to turn this into a highfalutin kind of discussion about port, but port's a serious wine. Like, it's a wine that changes in the glass, changes over time. It's a wine that you can open up tonight, and then in a month you can go back to that same bottle that's been sitting maybe in your fridge, maybe on your counter, and it hasn't changed a ton, but it's probably a hell of a lot smoother. And it's a wine that's different from any other wine you're going to have. I don't think I can put a Moscato d'Asti in the fridge for 3 weeks and come back to it and go, yeah, that's still delicious. Whereas port, absolutely.
So, I mean, you and I have just both waxed poetic about port. I visited Newport, I visited Ramos, and I visited Taylor's. In terms of hospitality, if you go to Portugal, 100% go visit Ramos Pinto. It offers a lot in terms of like a touristic aspect. Art and design is a big part of the brand. Like they have vintage advertisements that they put on postcards, things like that. So like there's just this really cool factor that goes with the brand. But on top of that, this is no knocks to Taylor's or Newport, because I brought back bottles from all three port houses. The quality was that good. But Ramos Pinto is without a doubt the best port house that I visited. And, it's another place where I'm very much looking forward to going and revisiting, because the thing is, so Ramos is one of those ones where the wines do occasionally go through the LCBO. They're generally not distributed widely on the shelves. You can order them online and to get them shipped to the store, and they're just a little bit hard to find, but when they do come, they're worth it. And it was so nice to be at the shop in Portugal and stock up on their full lineup of wines. And I brought back, I think, four bottles from them, including late bottled vintage, where something I learned, Michael, and this is something you're going to absolutely love as someone who loves port. When you're shopping for a late bottled vintage port, pay attention to the closure at the top and the front of the bottle. If you see something that's late bottle vintage port and it says unfiltered, it's probably, and it should be, sealed with a regular cork, which means that it'll age the same as vintage port, which can sometimes go for $100, $200 a bottle. And this was both at Newport and at Ramos that they told me this, that it's kind of a life hack for people like you and me, Michael, for wine snobs who love it, to get a deal on a bottle of vintage port. So look for your unfiltered LBV, your late bottle vintage port, and start collecting them, because you don't need to spend money to do that.
Correct. I've got lots of late bottled vintage port. I think I have the oldest one I have is a 2003.
But are they unfiltered?
That's a good question. I have some Croft. I have a Newport. I have some Taylor. Yeah.
But that's the thing, is it's not going to evolve the same way if it's sealed with the plastic stopper at the top.
True enough, but yeah, I still get some good fun out of all of them. I should bring one of my old late bottle vintages over for you to really have a go at it. Some of them are just great.
I would love that.
So, you're done in your Porto dealy do. I don't want to stomp all over you when I start talking about meats on Barbera.
Because we've been yakking for almost 45 minutes. We should probably think about wrapping this up.
So, just really quickly, what I'd love to see is more Nizza in Ontario, and that's where I am. As I said, Nizza Monferrato. It's the home of Barbera. I'm learning a lot about it, so you're going to see stuff on michaelpincuswinereview.com as I write things. Hopefully, I can get some of this into a magazine somewhere, but it'll definitely be on my website. This is Cru Barbera. This is and what's really cool about being here now is that the whole project starts in 2014. This is this is an area in its nascent stage of learning about itself. And the funny part is as I mentioned to somebody, they said, "What did you learn?" So I said, I told them what I've learned, and then I said, "But I can only learn what you guys tell me and what you guys know," which is not a lot at the moment because they're still trying to figure out their cruise. And they have like a map with all their little villages. So the best villages for Barbera, there's 18 villages around Nizza Monferrato. And they have identified at the moment 145 different crew, which is just going to rattle people's brains. It's like they want to jump from just being born to being 30 years old and driving a Ferrari, but they realize that they have to set this up slowly, or else they're going to just overwhelm the markets with all these different crews. And it's like they want to be Barolo, which is. Believe it or not, one of the things I did learn about Barolo is Barolo really, as a fine wine, is only about 50 years old. Like, it's not that old. It's as old as the Ontario wine industry, or younger. And it's Barolo. The area that we're in was mostly really poor, and people were leaving. And then, suddenly Barolo takes off, and it becomes, the wine that people now want to drink and they want to collect. But 50 years ago, Barolo was nothing. Nobody wanted it. That's why people were abandoning vineyards.
You know what? I think I'll save Vinho Verde for the new year for us to unpack it. But I think it's the thing that, like, you and I both are secretly looking for, because as much as we love drinking the good stuff, and we've had a hell of a year in terms of podcast drinking the good stuff, like dealing with Penfolds, dealing with Andy Pay at the beginning of the year, going to the Halpern tasting. But,
ended the year at Joseph for Insignia.
Yeah, the Joseph Phelps taste. Yeah, 100%. But I mean, I think deep down, like, you and I are both looking for, like, the overlooked region. And I do get the feeling that Vinho Verde is it. That's certainly one of them. Like, there's not just one. Like, there's a handful of them. So, like, it's exciting when when you see a region on the cusp of breaking through, and you can still get a good deal on them. And it's just like the sort of thing where, things in the wine business move a lot quicker than I thought, because, like, there's the memes floating around. I started writing about wine in 2010, so it's only been 14 years, and even now I can say, you know what? I remember when I could get Cru Beaujolais for $25 a bottle, and you take a look at what's coming through Lifford now, and, like, the Dominique Piron, like the Côte de Pisse stuff is over $50 a bottle. What happened? What happened, Mr. Piron? You used to be my go-to, like, cheap baller banger wines.
Yeah, as I said, I have a French guide here, and she said she grew up on Burgundy. And she says it breaks her heart now that, when she used to go 20 years ago, she used to be able to get bottles of, Burgundy. And now the prices have tripled, quadrupled, and it's hard to be a Burgundy fan these days.
So on that note, Merry Christmas, Michael.
Well, Merry Christmas, you. Happy Hanukkah, happy Kwanzaa. The whole 9 yards, and Happy New Year to you. You got big plans for the new year, like New Year's Eve?
I do have big plans for New Year's Eve, but I won't bore people with the details. I think we might need to review it, but it does involve, we might need to talk about it after, but it does involve copious amounts of Chardonnay.
Does it involve any bone?
It does not involve any bone.
Oh, okay. Well, that's too bad. Sorry to hear that. I know you like bone. When you visited Bone, you enjoyed it.
Yes, but for Bone, it's more for the reds, right? You're just trying to get me to say Bone over and over again. I see what you're doing now. All right. Thanks to everyone who's taken the time to listen to the podcast. We did pick up a few new subscribers this year. This is once again, my plea that it doesn't take a lot of money to keep the podcast going. Like, we do have low tiers on Patreon, patreon.com/2guystalkingwine. If you would like to give your favorite Two Guys Talking Wine a great gift, supporting us through Patreon is something we would certainly appreciate, because it does help us keep things going.
Keeps the lights on, as you said.
It does. I'm Andre Peru, at Andre Wine Review on social media.
Thanks for listening. Please subscribe to Two Guys Talking Wine on iTunes.
Two Guys Talking Wine is produced by Jim Ray, Adam Duran, and Ken Little.